There's something deeply off about Alone in the Dark, not in the way most early 80-second slashers feel clumsy or outdated, but in the way a sealed room smells wrong before you even open the door. It's a film that looks like a product of its time, until you scratch the surface and find things that were never meant to be there. 3 Oscar-winning actors, a director who would later toy with nightmares, and a script about institutional collapse, mistaken identity, and delusions that bleed into real violence. All of it wrapped in a production that seems like it was constantly drifting between accident and intention. It opens with a dream sequence, no one planned, filmed in a space that didn't belong to the film. It was shot inside a real mental health facility, one that didn't know how far the crew would go. And more than once, the line between the film's fiction and real-world disorder snapped under the weight of circumstance. There's no other horror film quite like it, not because of what it shows, but because of what it refuses to explain. Why certain scenes vanished, why cast members disappeared from retrospectives, and why one version of the VHS contains a single frame that no one will admit inserting. These are 20 weird facts you didn't know about Alone in the Dark. 1982. Fact 1. The opening dream was improvised and no one agreed on its meaning. The first scene in Alone in the Dark doesn't wait for logic. It drops us into a fever-drenched hallucination where roles collapse and reality flickers like faulty lighting. What's more disturbing is that this scene didn't even exist in the original blueprint. Director Jack Sholder scrapped the planned introduction days before filming. He wanted something more disorienting, more abstract. Donald Pleasance was informed the morning of the shoot. The set? Assembled hastily from discarded walls of another film, possibly altered states, and relit on instinct. Even the crew didn't quite understand what they were building. The cinematographer later admitted they just leaned into chaos. We didn't know what it meant, so we made it feel like that. That ambiguity rippled through decades of interpretation. Was it a nightmare from a patient, a prophecy, or simply misdirection? Some believe it sets the tone for the film's unstable logic. Others think it's an indulgence that undercuts the tension. But in the end, the most discussed moment of the movie was made up overnight, and no one agrees why. Fact 2. They filmed inside a working asylum until reality got too close. When the camera enters Haven, the psychiatric institution at the film's core, it feels cold and clinical in a way that no set ever truly captures. That's because it wasn't one. Alone in the Dark shot its interior asylum scenes in a partially active mental hospital in upstate New York. While the production had permission to use a disused wing, stories emerged that actors still in makeup and restraints wandered into operational areas, unsettling patients and staff alike. Jack Palance reportedly remained in character during downtime, pacing with a distant look and mumbling about surveillance. One nurse later claimed the film's presence was disrespectful to real suffering. The hospital declined official credit and requested no public association. There's an ethical question hovering here. Does authenticity in horror justify emotional collateral? In this case, the boundary between fiction and exploitation may have dissolved the moment the cameras rolled inside real walls. Fact 3. The blackout scene was too real, thanks to a real electrical failure. A central plot device in Alone in the Dark is a sudden power outage that unlocks chaos. But during filming, the fiction turned into fact. As the crew prepared to shoot the blackout sequence, a transformer blew in the surrounding neighborhood. Power to the set was lost. With no time to reschedule, the crew lit scenes with handheld rigs, car headlights, and battery-powered torches. Some takes were done in near-complete darkness. Director Jack Sholder chose to keep these imperfect shots, their rawness, their flickering shadows as part of the final cut. They weren't just believable, they were real. Few viewers realized that one of the film's most nerve-wracking sequences is barely lit because it wasn't supposed to be shot that night at all. When artificial horror and accidental disaster meet, the screen becomes something else, entirely a document of things falling apart on and off camera. Fact 4. The original lead actor vanished before shooting began. Dr. Dan Potter, the quiet psychiatrist at the center of the chaos, was almost played by someone else, someone who simply disappeared. Before Dwight Schultz was cast, a different actor had signed on for the role. According to casting logs, he went through fittings, approved the script, and even confirmed his hotel. Then, 2 days before rehearsals, he vanished without notice. No goodbye, no statement. His agent couldn't reach him. The crew moved on. Dwight Schultz was flown in with little prep. His reserved energy turned out to be exactly what the role needed. Not a hero, but a man trying not to collapse. In hindsight, that last-minute replacement may have saved the film's tone. One producer, when asked years later, said, The character was haunted by absence, so was the production. No one ever revealed who the original actor was. Maybe that's part of the myth now. Fact 5. Donald Pleasance refused to play the doctor as rational. Dr. Leo Bain, the facility's director, speaks in riddles and acts more like a guru than a physician. That wasn't in the screenplay. That was Donald Pleasance. The script called for a steady-handed professional, a man barely clinging to bureaucratic order. But Pleasance had other plans. He told Sholder he would portray Bain as someone who believed in the divine logic of chaos, and he stuck to it. He altered lines. He improvised long monologues. He delivered diagnoses like sermons. The director resisted, but ultimately gave in, because somehow it worked. Bain became the most ambiguous figure in the film. Audience members couldn't decide if he was harmless or the most dangerous person in the room. Pleasance, ever elusive, never clarified his choices. Let them wonder, he reportedly said. And they still are. Fact 6. Martin Landau's hymn was never written and never sung again. Preacher, the soft-voiced arsonist played by Martin Landau, hums a chilling hymn throughout the film, one that doesn't seem to belong to any denomination. That's because Landau made it up. The tune was never scripted, never discussed. On set, he simply began humming it between takes. When asked where it came from, he reportedly said, "I dreamed it." Or maybe he did. During a break, a visiting child, the daughter of a production assistant, heard him humming and screamed in panic. She believed she'd seen something inhuman. She refused to return to set. Landau never apologized, not out of cruelty, but conviction. Preacher wouldn't stop humming, he said. The hymn was never recorded separately, and Landau never used it in any role again. But those who heard it say they've never forgotten the sound. Fact 7. They filmed a storm scene, then a real one took over. In the scene where the asylum descends into chaos during a blackout, the wind howls and thunder rattles the walls. Most viewers assume it was well-crafted sound design. It wasn't. It was real. Midway through filming, a storm rolled in violent, unplanned, and directly over the set. The crew lost lighting. Production assistants scrambled to protect equipment, but instead of calling it off, Jack Sholder gave a single command: use it. What followed was an unrepeatable convergence, actors improvising panic as lights flickered for real, and set pieces collapsed under wind pressure. The footage was grainy, erratic, but charged with raw energy, so they kept it. What began as fiction ended with nature hijacking the frame. You're not watching a simulation of disaster. You're watching it happen in real time. Sometimes the horror doesn't come from what's written, but from what the sky decides. Fact 8. Jack Palance deleted 2 kill scenes because his character had rules. Hawks, the most composed of the escaped patients, isn't less dangerous, he's more deliberate. That was Jack Palance's choice. 2 scenes showing him committing graphic violence were written into the script. One in a hospital hallway, one in a suburban driveway. Palance read them and refused. He's not a maniac, he's a soldier, he said. Producers objected. Sholder hesitated. But Palance didn't budge. The scenes were cut. His reasoning? Hawks wasn't driven by impulse but by judgment. When he does act, it's with intent, not frenzy. The result is a character far more unsettling than originally planned. Because when someone waits before they strike, you never know when it's coming or why. Fact 9. The plot mirrors a real-life asylum escape, and it was almost too close. The idea of a blackout leading to a violent escape from a psychiatric hospital sounds like classic horror fiction. But in 1979, something disturbingly similar happened in New Jersey. 4 patients escaped during an electrical failure. 2 staff members were killed. The story made headlines across the East Coast. Screenwriter Earl Ghaffari was already working on a script when the case broke, and parts of the dialogue eerily echoed statements made by the real escapees. When word got out, the studio panicked. Lawyers combed through the screenplay. Changes were made, but not all traces were erased. One line, "They forgot the locks," reportedly came straight from police transcripts. The studio denied the connection, but families of the victims, upon watching the film, allegedly recognized more than just coincidence. Some stories are born from imagination, others from events we'd rather forget but never quite do. Fact 10. The film was forced indoors by a town that wanted it gone. The Potter House wasn't meant to be the stage for most of the story. Originally, the script had scenes unfolding across streets, stores, and public spaces. But the town where production started had other ideas. After just a few days of outdoor filming, local complaints rolled in. Some residents objected to the film's portrayal of mental illness. One business banned the crew. A local permit was revoked without explanation. Left without options, The crew rewrote pages overnight to confine the second act almost entirely inside the house set. Production designers frantically reconfigured the layout to serve as multiple locations within a single space. The change suffocated the narrative in a good way. Claustrophobia replaced scale. What was meant to be wide and reactive became tight and personal. What could have been a logistical failure became the film's emotional furnace, not because they planned it, but because they had no way out. Fact 11. A lightning flash created the scariest shot. Thanks to a joke, there's a moment in Alone in the Dark that jolts even seasoned horror fans. A split-second flash reveals Preacher's face, staring dead-eyed through a window. It's not loud, it's not prolonged, but it's unforgettable, and it began as a joke. During a break, a boom operator quipped, "What if Landau just popped up like a ghost painting?" Director Jack Sholder paused. "Let's shoot that," he said. The crew rigged a strobe, placed Landau behind the window, and timed the flash manually. He stood motionless for minutes. No rehearsal, no build-up. Just one quick scare born out of an offhand comment. Audiences jumped. One preview viewer reportedly dropped his drink. The studio used the frame in posters, then regretted it, feeling it gave too much away. But the shot remains iconic. Proof that in horror, sometimes the most chilling ideas arrive with a laugh. Fact 12. The dinner scene wasn't in the script until the cast demanded it change. Midway through the siege, the family gathers around the dinner table, trying to hold on to routine as fear creeps in. The conversation is tense, broken, painfully human. It also wasn't what was written. The original dialogue was a flat exchange of exposition, plot setup, backstory hints, a bit of foreshadowing. But the actors hated it. On the day of shooting, they approached Jack Sholder with a unified plea. This isn't how scared people talk. Rather than fight it, he let them rework it. The result? Messy overlaps, interruptions, silence where scripted lines used to be. It felt real because it came from performers already living inside the dread. The dinner table became a war room, not between characters, but between survival instinct and the urge to pretend nothing's wrong. Sometimes the best horror isn't what's outside. It's what people say when they're too scared to say the truth. Fact 13. A prop failure turned into a real injury, and they kept rolling. In a suspenseful hallway moment, Preacher slices through a curtain, nearly striking Potter's daughter. The blade moves fast. Too fast. That's because it wasn't rubber. A miscommunication in props led to the wrong knife being used, a dulled but real blade instead of the safe replica. Martin Landau, committed and intense, lunged as scripted, but the knife tore through fabric and nicked the actress's arm. Filming stopped for medical attention. The wound wasn't serious, but it rattled everyone except Landau, who remained stone-faced. Preacher wouldn't panic, he reportedly said. The scream in the final cut wasn't planned. It wasn't rehearsed. It was real fear caught on film. They kept the take. Because sometimes horror doesn't need fiction. It just needs a moment no one meant to happen. Fact 14. The line that changed the ending was never in the script. As the final standoff unfolds, Hawks stares down Dr. Potter and mutters, "You're not who I thought you were." The line lands like a cold verdict, quiet, final, strange. It wasn't written. Jack Palance was meant to deliver a longer monologue about betrayal and justice. But just before cameras rolled, he asked Sholder for one clean take with a simpler idea. He delivered the single line, turned, and walked away. It shifted the scene's tone. The confrontation wasn't about revenge anymore. It became about disillusionment, about misreading someone so completely, it breaks your sense of control. Sholder re-edited the climax around that moment, and it's now the film's emotional fulcrum. The silence that follows? That wasn't scripted either. That's what happens when actors say more with less and let the weight hang in the air. Fact 15. The final shot was a last-minute invention designed to unsettle. The last image in Alone in the Dark is wordless. A patient watching static on TV, eyes wide, smiling slightly. It's eerie. It's tonally jarring. It wasn't part of the original ending. Test audiences hated the first version, a safe, tidy resolution with sirens and survivors. "Too clean," said one executive, so Jack Sholder asked for an extra night of shooting and called Erland Van Lith. The instructions were minimal. Just watch the screen. Act like it's talking to you. The result was unnerving. It wasn't just a weird beat. It was a choice to leave viewers stranded in discomfort. No answers, no relief, just one face, staring and smiling. Sometimes the scariest endings are the ones that never close the door. Fact 16. They switched to house paint for blood because the fake stuff froze. By the time the film hits its final stretch, blood is everywhere. Thick, glistening, strangely vivid. That unnatural look? It wasn't artistic choice. It was survival. The production was hit by a cold snap during indoor night shoots. The standard fake blood, a mix of syrup and dye, began freezing under the lights. It thickened, congealed, became unusable. Out of time, the art team substituted with red tempera house paint mixed with glycerin. It didn't freeze, it didn't clot. It stuck like fresh lacquer. Some viewers praised the vivid color as deliberate. It wasn't, but it gave the climax a heightened, nightmarish tone that stuck with audiences even if it also stuck to the walls long after wrap. Blood as metaphor is common. Blood as hardware store accident? That's Alone in the Dark. Fact 17. They filmed a twist ending and then hid it. At one point, the filmmakers planned to end Alone in the Dark with a gut punch. Potter and his family, months later, confined to a psychiatric ward, themselves blank, broken, roles reversed. They shot it, scored it, cut it in, then buried it. Test audiences reportedly reacted with hostility. Then why did I care? One viewer asked. Executives deemed it too cruel. Jack Sholder protested, calling it the only honest ending. The scene was pulled. Only one known still remains. Schultz in a hospital gown, staring past the camera like he doesn't recognize it. Was it too dark or just too real? Maybe the scariest outcomes aren't the violent ones. They're the ones where no one escapes with their mind intact. FACT 18. The end credits soundtrack was meant to be cheerful. As the credits roll, Alone in the Dark ditches dread for something bizarre. A chipper, borderline sitcom-like theme. It confuses people. That was the point. Composer Renato Serio was asked to make it sound like a game show. When he hesitated, producers played him clips from The Price is Right. Their logic: the audience should feel wrong-footed, unsure whether to laugh or flinch. The theme that plays is bouncy, cheerful, major key, completely out of sync with what just happened, and exactly what the film needed. It's not there to soothe. It's there to unsettle, a musical wink that dares you to ask, was that supposed to happen? When horror bleeds into irony, nothing sounds quite right again. Fact 19. The studio didn't know how to sell it, so they barely tried. With a cast full of Oscar winners and a provocative premise, Alone in the Dark should have been a breakout hit for New Line Cinema. Instead, it was quietly released and quickly forgotten. Why? Because no one knew what to call it. Was it a slasher? A satire? A psychological thriller? The marketing department went through multiple poster designs and 4 different taglines. Internal memos revealed deep confusion over tone. One exec allegedly said, "It's like Halloween with existential dread that's not a pitch." TV spots were inconsistent. Distribution was limited. When A Nightmare on Elm Street began picking up steam, New Line turned its attention elsewhere. The result? Alone in the Dark faded from theaters within weeks, never getting the attention its chaos arguably deserved. It didn't fail. It just fell between the cracks and into cult status. Fact 20. A frame that no one claimed appeared in the VHS release. Collectors of the first VHS edition of Alone in the Dark discovered something strange: a single, disjointed frame wedged between 2 scenes, visible only if you pause at the exact right moment. The image? A close-up of an unblinking eye, surrounded by static, reflecting what looked like fire. It wasn't in the theatrical release. It wasn't mentioned in editing notes, and when asked, no one, not the director, the editor, nor the studio, claimed responsibility. Investigations traced the frame back to a test reel used during color correction, one never meant for duplication. Somehow, it ended up embedded in retail copies. The frame was removed from later releases, but it still exists, buried in tapes now traded as collector's oddities, known by fans as the eye cut. A mistake? A prank? Or something someone slipped in on purpose? Bonus fact: one actor claims the character still visits but not on set. Long after production wrapped, one cast member reportedly stopped accepting interviews about the film, not out of embarrassment, but because, in his words, "He won't let me." The he wasn't a director or a producer. It was the character. According to a private account shared with a horror archivist, the actor began experiencing vivid dreams, always the same. A darkened room, a figure watching, silent, familiar. Each time the actor tried to revisit the role publicly, the dreams returned. If he stopped talking about the film, they vanished. He turned down conventions, avoided retrospectives, refused commentaries. What unsettled fans was this: he wasn't known for dramatics. He never sought attention. He simply withdrew, quietly, deliberately. The figure in the dream never speaks, just watches. no official statement was ever made. But when Alone in the Dark was remastered for its anniversary release, his name was left off the promotional material without explanation. Maybe it's coincidence, maybe it's an actor myth, or maybe some characters don't wait for reshoots. They wait in the dark for anyone who dares bring them back. If a film is forgotten, does that make it safer to watch? Alone in the Dark didn't just blur fiction and reality, it left both slightly damaged. From the missing frame to the actor who won't speak, its legacy is stitched together from absence and refusal. So tell us, which fact made you pause, and which one felt like it was never supposed to be uncovered? And while you're at it, which forgotten film do you think deserves the next descent into shadow?